Ancient humans did not have soap. They had no shampoo, no body wash, and no stores selling hygiene products. Yet many of them spent their entire lives outdoors, covered in sweat, smoke, animal fat, mud, and dust. That's why most people assume they must have been constantly filthy. But that assumption is wrong. A hunter kneels beside a river at sunrise. Instead of reaching for soap, he scoops up wet ash from the remains of last night's fire and rubs it across his skin. After a quick rinse, much of the grease and dirt is gone. To us, that sounds strange. To him, it was completely normal. The idea that humans only became clean after the invention of soap is one of the biggest misconceptions about the ancient world. Long before the first bars of soap appeared, people had already discovered ways to wash their bodies, clean their hair, reduce odors, and remove dirt. Some of those methods were surprisingly effective, and a few were based on principles that modern cleaning products still rely on today. Soap itself, in the form we recognize today, is not some ancient mystery lost to time. Historical records preserved on Babylonian clay tablets, dating back roughly 4,800 years, describe a substance made by boiling fat with ash, a genuine early form of soap created through a chemical reaction called saponification. Wood ash contains potassium carbonate, a mildly alkaline compound. Combine that with rendered animal fat from a properly hunted, cleanly butchered kill. Heat it, and the two ingredients transform into a crude, but functional cleansing substance. This was not accidental trial and error repeated once. It was a discovery stable enough, useful enough, to get written down and passed forward for thousands of years. But that written record only covers a few thousand years. Humans have existed for roughly 300,000. So what happened during all those earlier centuries, long before anyone thought to boil fat and ash together on purpose? Picture a small group returning from a hunt, hands and forearms marked with the honest evidence of hard, physical work. Before eating, before resting, hands went straight into the nearest stream. Cold water alone, applied consistently, removes a significant portion of surface dirt, loose debris, and bacteria simply through mechanical action. Researchers studying basic hygiene science confirm that plain water rinsing, done often enough, accomplishes far more than most people assume, especially when compared against doing nothing at all. Water alone was never the whole answer, though, and this is where things get genuinely resourceful. Ash, even without being combined with fat first, functioned as a rough, effective abrasive cleaner entirely on its own. Rubbed directly onto skin, it lifts oil and ground in dirt the same way a gentle scouring powder works today, mechanically scraping away grime that water alone struggles to fully remove. Evidence from studying ash residue at ancient habitation sites, alongside continued ash-based cleaning practices documented in several traditional societies still active today, supports this as a genuine, deliberate hygiene method, rather than pure coincidence. There is another method worth examining closely, one that relied on oil rather than water at all. Ancient Greek and Roman men commonly coated their skin in plant oil, most often oil pressed from properly harvested olives, before scraping it off using a curved metal or bone tool called a strigil. The oil worked its way into pores, loosening dirt, sweat, and dead skin, which the scraping tool then physically removed in a single motion. Archaeological digs across the ancient Mediterranean world have recovered strigils by the thousands, everyday objects clearly meant for repeated, routine use, rather than rare ceremonial occasions. This was not a backup method used only when water was scarce. For many men in these societies, oil and scraping was the primary, preferred way to get properly clean. Picture a man standing in a modest bathing area, working oil across his own forearms with steady, practiced motion, then drawing the curved strigil down each limb in smooth, deliberate strokes. The tool makes a distinct, quiet sound against skin, oil and grime gathering along its curved edge with every pass. No lather. No rinse required immediately afterward. Just oil applied with intention and a simple tool doing exactly the job it was shaped for. Fine, dry sand and certain soft clays served a strikingly similar purpose. Rubbed across skin already damp from a river or stream, these materials absorbed excess oil and lifted away dead skin, functioning almost like an early exfoliant. Clay in particular carries a mild natural absorbency that draws oil and impurities away from the skin's surface, a property still used in cosmetic products marketed today. For that exact same reason, teeth received their own version of this same careful attention, something easy to overlook when picturing hygiene as purely a skin-deep concern. Archaeological evidence from ancient Egypt describes a fine tooth powder made from crushed ash combined with ground pumice, and in some recipes, crushed eggshell, applied to the teeth using a chewed, frayed twig that functioned remarkably close to a modern toothbrush. This was not a rare luxury reserved for a wealthy few. Similar frayed twig tools, sometimes called chew sticks, have been documented across numerous ancient cultures on multiple continents. Each population apparently arriving at a strikingly similar solution to the exact same basic problem, entirely independent of one another. Here is a question worth sitting with for a moment. If someone handed you nothing but a handful of ash, a patch of river clay, and cold running water, do you honestly think you could get yourself properly clean? Most people assume the answer is no. Ancient humans proved otherwise, day after day, for thousands of generations. It is also worth remembering that no single method described so far was universal across every ancient population on Earth. Communities living near consistent, clean water sources naturally leaned on frequent rinsing as their primary method. Populations in drier, more arid regions with limited water access relied far more heavily on sand, ash and oil-based scraping instead, conserving scarce water for drinking rather than washing. Coastal communities had access to certain salt-tolerant plants entirely unavailable further inland, while forest-dwelling populations had a completely different range of natural, saponin-producing plants growing within easy reach. Ancient hygiene was never one single method invented once and spread everywhere. It was dozens of independent, environment-specific solutions, each one shaped by whatever a particular landscape happened to provide. There is an entire category of plant-based cleaning that deserves real attention here too. A plant called soapwort, still growing wild across large parts of Europe and Asia today, contains natural compounds called saponins, chemicals that produce a genuine, gentle foaming lather when crushed and mixed with water. Museum conservators still use soapwort today to clean delicate historical textiles precisely because it cleans effectively without the harsh chemical damage modern detergents can cause. If a plant this effective was available in the wild, it stands to reason ancient populations living alongside it discovered and used it constantly, long before anyone wrote a formal name for the compound responsible. Across the ocean, indigenous peoples throughout the Americas independently discovered a different plant carrying the exact same saponin-based cleaning property, the root of the yucca plant. Crushed, soaked, and worked into water by hand, yucca root produces a natural, mild lather still used today by some communities for washing hair and skin, a documented practice passed down and studied by ethnobotanists for generations. Two completely separate populations, continents apart, arrived independently at the same basic chemical solution, using whatever plant their own local environment happened to provide. Picture a young man crouched beside a riverbank, crushing a handful of root between two flat stones, working the pulp directly into his wet hair. No formula, no laboratory, just careful, repeated observation passed down from someone older who had done the exact same thing 1,000 times before him. There is a social dimension to all of this worth mentioning as well. Washing was rarely a solitary chore performed alone in silence. Anthropologists studying present-day traditional societies have repeatedly observed river bathing and communal grooming functioning as genuine social occasions, a shared daily ritual where news traveled, tools got repaired, and younger men learned cleaning techniques simply by watching older men do it beside them. Getting clean and staying connected to the group were never separate activities. They happened at the exact same time, in the exact same spot, day after day. None of this means ancient hygiene solved every problem perfectly, and this is where the story gets a little more complicated. Body odor itself is influenced heavily by diet, something modern research has confirmed through controlled studies comparing how different eating patterns affect the way human sweat actually smells to other people. Diets built around whole, natural food sources, closer to what most ancient humans consistently ate, have been associated in several published studies with sweat that people rate as noticeably less unpleasant compared to sweat produced after eating heavily processed meals. In other words, ancient humans may have had a quiet biological advantage working in their favor before they ever touched a drop of water, simply because of what they were eating in the first place. Fire and smoke played their own unexpected role in this picture as well. Regular, close exposure to wood smoke, something virtually unavoidable for anyone living near a maintained campfire, has been studied for its mild effect on reducing external skin parasites like lice, an uncomfortable but extremely common problem throughout most of human history. Researchers examining this connection are careful to note the effect is modest rather than a complete solution, but it stands as one more small, mostly accidental hygiene benefit layered onto a technology already credited with warmth, cooking, and protection from predators. Grooming itself went well beyond simple cleaning too. Archaeological digs across multiple ancient sites have recovered carefully carved combs made from bone and antler, alongside sharpened shell fragments and fine stone blades clearly shaped for cutting or trimming hair. These are not the tools of a population that had given up on personal appearance. They are the tools of people who cared enough about how they looked and felt to invest real time and effort into shaping specialized objects for exactly that purpose. So here is the honest answer to the question this video opened with. Before soap as a manufactured product existed, ancient humans were not living in filth. They were combining consistent water exposure, abrasive ash and clay, naturally lathering plants like soapwort and yucca root, a diet that may have quietly worked in their favor, and dedicated grooming tools, into a complete, functional hygiene system built entirely from what their environment handed them. It was not identical to a modern shower and a bar of soap. In many practical ways, built from nothing but careful observation repeated across countless generations, it came remarkably close. The next time you reach for a bottle of soap without a second thought, remember that the instinct behind that simple act, the basic human desire to feel clean, to scrape away the evidence of a hard day's work, is not a modern invention at all. It is one of the oldest, most quietly persistent habits our species has ever carried forward, refined generation after generation, long before anyone ever wrote its recipe down on clay or paper.